I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is. Eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on? It's not enough to say it's nuts. You have to explain why it's so nuts. The invention of artificial life, the cloning of human beings, possible contact with extraterrestrials, the systems which are in place to keep the world sane are utterly inadequate to the forces that have been unleashed.
Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Kaedrich Olsen. Be sure to watch my films, Occult Louisiana on Tubi, Roku channel, and multiple streaming platforms. Doors of Perception available on Amazon Prime, soon to be on Tubi as well. We are booking guests for October. If you have suggestions or you'd like to be a guest, email me forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. Today I want to welcome back to the show Kaedrich Olsen. He is an internationally renowned author, speaker, and teacher who specializes in divergent paths of spiritual growth, from seances at an early age to a lifetime of esoteric practices. Kaedrich, welcome back. How you doing?
Doing great. Thank you for having me back. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Definitely, man. Very much looking forward to this. I've noticed in the past few years there's been a great number of people exploring Gnostic spiritual beliefs, or re-exploring, which is quite understandable looking at the events of the past few years. Now, today we're going to share your understanding of what are known as the Archons and the possibility of an energetic control grid surrounding the planet. Now, this is such a big topic, and I've done plenty of shows surrounding this, and I'm very much looking forward to getting your perspective. I love getting as many perspectives on this as possible. Before you do, it's been a little while since you've been on. Remind the audience a little bit about yourself and let them know how they can find out more about you.
Absolutely. A little bit about myself. Let's see. I grew up in a paranormal home, paranormal lifestyle, meaning everything from my mother's OBGYN when she was pregnant with me. He's Dr. Robert Bradley, who would hold seances in his house. He had regular lectures at the spiritualist church that I went to, and the spiritualist church is just like your typical Protestant church, but the services end with trance channelers coming up on stage, doing some mediumship on the stage. And the church held seances regularly every Saturday night in the church basement. So that was a regular part of my upbringing. My mom got me into psychic development classes as a kid.
Now, let me ask you, at the seances, did you experience anything that would be considered profound, any physical manifestations, things like that?
Not in the church seances. They were primarily channeling. We would sit in meditation for about 20, 30 minutes, and then the channelers would open up the channel and communicate through. The church would occasionally bring in trumpets, where you could hear faint little whispers coming out of there, but they weren't really into physical mediumship. And here's the interesting thing is, well, I'll start it this way. For interacting with the paranormal, I've got 10 rules. And the primary rule is that similarities attract and perpetuate. Whatever your mindset is, whatever the setting is you set up, is what you'll draw to you. And because this was in a church setting, because we went into a meditation, because we raised the energy to a higher level, only higher level beings could come through. Only higher level beings could communicate. So nothing could go awry, nothing could go bad, and nothing ever did, despite me being scared to death because of, I loved horror movies even as a kid. And it was hard to reconcile what I was seeing in the movies versus what I was experiencing in real life. That took a few years to get used to that dichotomy. But no, they were just the conveyance of information. And that's one of the things I like to impress upon people is that the movies and the TV shows, even the ghost hunter TV shows, paranormal investigator shows, tend to exaggerate circumstances to the point where people think that they've never had a paranormal experience because they're expecting a disembodied voice yelling to get out or banging on the walls or a book flying across the room. When a vast majority of a paranormal experiences, you tend to know something. You don't know how you know it, but you know it. Or you get this feeling, this memory of hanging out with grandma, and you get this warm, fuzzy feeling. Those are actual paranormal experiences. And of all of the seances I've been to, all of the seances that I've conducted, the seances I've taught people how to do, they would make for a very boring movie or very boring TV show because it's not like what you see at all in the media. It's very subdued, it's very calm, very peaceful, but very enlightening at the same time.
When it comes to what we're going to be discussing today, as I mentioned in my intro, I've noticed a lot of people looking at Gnosticism, researching the spiritual beliefs, and in my perspective, it's pretty understandable. We've had some very interesting things unfold over the past few years that has changed people's awareness, gotten people to start looking at reality in a different way. Have you noticed the same thing, that people are starting to question the nature of reality, and there seems to be some dark force that has control at a high level?
Absolutely. And I think that's due to more of humanity becoming more aware. I really blame a huge chunk of the dark forces taking over everything on the Middle Ages. Because when Christianity came into very strong power in the Middle Ages, they shut down as hard as they could any of the indigenous practices, any of the natural religions where people were living with spiritual beings. They considered land spirits, ancestors, all sorts of spiritual beings to be their neighbors, something that they coexisted with peacefully, harmoniously. Sure, there were some difficult moments. Sure, there were some misunderstandings and some problems, but Christianity came in and turned it all into evil, demonic, that you have to shut it down. Anybody communicating with these beings were evil, they were terrible. And plus, look at the actions of the church across the world. You know, the Crusades, the Inquisition, the witch burnings. It just brought some severe darkness onto the world and it shut people down. And then the second round of that sort of came as a double-edged sword with the invention of the scientific method. Because of course that they started questioning church doctrine with that, because they now want to test the world to see how the world works rather than just take the Bible for it. But that led to that scientific revolution where only if we can test it and validate it and prove it is it real, and it has to fit within our parameters. And so that further shut down because we don't yet have the science to fully back up paranormal experiences outside of the anecdotal. And because of that, people just say, nope, it's not real, shut down, let's make fun of it, let's tease people, and if not, therefore it's evil, let's cut it out, shut our abilities down. Now we get into the modern age, and people are starting to awaken. People are starting to become more aware of their own abilities. They're more aware of the subtle realities around them, which is causing them to question, like, wait, these weren't my thoughts. Wait, that wasn't something normal. That isn't happening here. So while we had this shutdown at a global scale, some of these things sort of crept in and became a little bit more prevalent. They were always there, but they became a little more prevalent due to our forced naivety, due to our forced blocking of our abilities and our awareness. And now that we're becoming online more and more, people are going, uh-oh, something's here, something we got to take care of. We got to be aware of this. But what do we do about it? And that's where we have to be careful of the fear-based narratives that are continuing to shut down, saying, no, this is, the Ouija board is evil. Don't touch it. Don't do anything with that one. Oh no, there are these reptilian forces. There's these archonic forces taking over. Just go peace, love, and light. Shut it down. Get away from it. Where we got to bring more awareness. We got to bring our own higher mind to this so that we can get away from those fear-based narratives continuing to keep us shut down and keeping a hold on the rest of the world through those fear-based
So
narratives.
this is very interesting. You're saying during the Middle Ages, when Christianity was coming into power across the planet, that we had symbiotic relationships with the spirit realm, and it was shut down and demonized, and this negative energy started permeating the planet because of the oppression that was happening, and that allowed negative forces to come in and take over as a sort of parasite in the consciousness of humanity. Would you say that's accurate?
Absolutely. In fact, let's expand on that with a bit of a thought experiment. Imagine if there was an absolute evil being. I don't think there is. And I got some thoughts behind why there is not an absolute evil being. But imagine that there was an absolute evil being and that it infiltrated the church and took it over. What would that look like? And therefore, you have the whole Middle Ages unfolding right before you.
There's many that have explored the possibility that the quote-unquote God of the Old Testament is this nefarious parasitic entity because of the information that comes through. War, pedophilia, murder, all these horrible things that were commanded by this jealous-seeming entity.
Absolutely, and that brings us right into Gnosticism. Because if we uncover the Gnostic stories, we find that this was the original version of Christianity before the Council of Nicaea in the 3rd century, 300s, basically made Gnosticism heresy, and anybody who followed it were executed summarily because Catholicism took over. And in the Gnostic tradition, they say that Sophia, the goddess Sophia, where's that coming from in Christianity, right? The goddess Sophia, goddess of wisdom, decided to bring her sacredness into the world. And so she brought Yahweh in to create the world, to create humanity, and to help humanity find its divine spark. But when Yahweh created the world and created everything, the jealous God, he put himself as like this tyrant in control. There is no advancement. There is no growth. You cannot evolve. This is it. You just have to worship and serve me. And Sophia was like, no, that's not okay. We can't do that. So that's where we get the serpent from. And remember, until Middle Ages and Christianity, the serpent was a symbol of wisdom. It was a symbol of higher spiritual growth. And so the serpent came into the Garden of Eden to allow these human beings to access their divine spark, to awaken. And that's what Lucifer is. Lucifer didn't become an evil being until the 1700s. But we'll get to that if we need to. But Lucifer at that time period was actually equated, and you can find poems that will show you this, that Lucifer and the Christ were one and the same. Lucifer was not an evil being, and the Christ was an example for humanity to achieve divine being in the world. The Christ was fueling that divine spark, putting it into flame so that you could become a sacred being living in the world. Think of like a Buddha. Everyone has the potential to be a Buddha. They just need to do their spiritual work. They need to do their growth. They hit that moment of enlightenment. They awaken. That's what the Christ is. And that was what the original form of Gnosticism was about, not salvation by submission to a single being, but by using that Christ, Yeshua ben Yusuf, what now we call Jesus, as an example for our own spiritual growth so that we can fuel that divine spark and grow. But that is a big no-no to the Catholic Church because you have to submit, you have to, look for salvation from them because you were an evil being already because of the original sin, which didn't exist in the Gnostic tradition. And that's also where the Archons come in. Those are the Archons that work with Yahweh to shut down humanity, keep us dumbed down basically, keep us submissive, keep us afraid, keep us reliant and compliant. And that is the motivation of Yahweh, according to Gnosticism, whereas the Christ is about awakening and moving into that higher sense of being for yourself.
Well, let's explore the concept of the Archons a bit more. If you look at the biblical narrative, they are fallen angels that came to corrupt humanity, teach humanity forbidden knowledge, and this is what led to the current state that we're in now. But they are still these disembodied spirits that whisper in humanity's ears and cause evil on the planet. But what are we really looking at here?
That's a very good question. These could be transdimensional entities, beings that come from another parallel reality that thrive on fear, that thrive on suffering. And that we'll set this as kind of the baseline of where my view of this goes, is that every emotion we feel, every thought we feel, every belief we have, not only has a biochemical component, neurotransmitters, hormones, and that sort of thing, but it also has an energy expression, energetic expression. You know, anger is an energy. Fear, love, all of these are energies that we can express, and they fill the environment around us. So you can fill a room full of love. You know, you see a home full of love or a home full of negativity, you know, depending on what the people are like when they're living there. And in the archonic realms, that's called loosh. That fear, that suffering, that negative energy is called loosh. And archons work a little bit different than some of the other entities because they work on a global scale, even a mass scale, communities. And the way I like to look at archonic influence is for zeitgeist, you know, the spirit of the times. Those are the forces that can rile us up at a mass level so that we all have to get together and stop them. You know, it's us versus them. So we have to go get them before they get us. It's what convinces us to demonize another population of people on the planet, another community, even if it's a football team, you know, a rival football team. You know, I will chalk up the genocide in Rwanda to this. You know, you're a Hutu. No, you're a Tutsi. Okay, let's kill each other over that. And so they'll stir up that zeitgeist so that the mass swath of people will just generate the suffering. And even in some of these genocide situations, they don't care if the peacekeepers come in because the peacekeepers are coming in with weapons and tanks and guns and all that sort of stuff to basically continue the suffering, continue the warfare. And that's what these beings are very much into. And they have different faces. You know, of course, there are these archons, which the word archon means ruler, which I find very fascinating. The word anarchy is without rulers. So it's very interesting that anarchy is sort of like self-development, self-reliance, independence, not destroy the government. That's completely different. That's another narrative that's out there. But these archons are trying to rule over humanity. And one of the faces they've taken, even since some of the ancient cultures, are these reptilian beings that come in disguised as human beings. They're these reptilian aliens. And we see that even in modern day, people saying that there are reptilian beings influencing Congress, influencing financial institutions, corporations at a mass scale that are doing things that are detrimental to humanity. I'm a follower of the Norse tradition. That's been my path since I was a teenager. And in the Norse tradition, these are called Thurs, Thurs, where they're a type of giant that just stirs up strife and destruction. And they do it for their own benefit because as long as we're suffering, as long as we're anger and fear and hatred, that's the kind of energy they thrive on. And they fuel us to continue to fuel them.
So these beings can take human form. Is it that they have access to a human through possession of some sort, or are they manipulating energy and the physical realm in order to manifest in some way?
That's a great question because the answer is all of the above. I want you to sort of think of it like a slippery slope, that they come into the energetic influence of a political leader, let's say, and all they're doing is just putting some fear energy into the room, putting some anxiety energy into the room, some aggression energy. That's all they're doing. So now that political leader is a little juiced up. They're a little more anxious. They're a little bit more aggressive. And then they start taking actions. They start saying words that are based on that energetic influence that they're getting. And that starts generating that energy. And then the whispers start. Oh, hey, how about you try this? Ooh, no, look at what he's saying. That's completely wrong. Oh, look at those guys over there. They're trying to get you. Those whispers start. And when they've got that emotional, energetic influence, and then those whispers go in, they start doing things and they start building up their influence of other people. And then they start getting on the news media and social media, start building up that zeitgeist, and that energy just spreads. It just kind of fans out from that source. So it starts off very subtly, but then it builds up And it eventually gets to the point where, let's say, this entity and that political leader are one. Their energies merge, and that we would call possession. And that is what some of the ancient tales would say is a human being that is really a reptilian in disguise or an archon in disguise, because that's kind of what it is. They're using that human being as a mask, as a costume to hide themselves. And then all of a sudden it's now that extraterrestrial interdimensional being, whatever it is, influencing that political leader, and that political leader becomes it.
So would you say that there are entire generations of families that are possessed by these beings that perpetuate this?
That's a really good question, because the upper strata of societies, the people that are born into that, live in a vastly different world than, let's say, the commoner, than the vast majority of the people. The behaviors that is considered acceptable and normal in that upper strata would be considered appalling to the rest of commonality. Just the way they manipulate people, the things that they do on a regular basis is normal to them. I'll give you a very interesting example. I had a friend once who grew up in the normal school system, but she was a very intelligent person. She got a scholarship to one of these higher class schools, and she went into the school, and the training there is completely different. Where in the common schools, we're told that if you work harder, study harder, do more time at your studying, that's where you're going to get your good grades. That's where you're going to get your A's. But when you get into this other school, you still have to work, you still have to study. But if you get a C, you are expected to go to the teacher and negotiate for an A. You are taught how to really coordinate people and manipulate people and motivate people at a larger scale. The education is completely different in these upper strata schools. And that just conveys throughout that whole populace. So it makes it so much easier for these kind of entities to slip in. And once they get their grip on a family, we see generational abuse. One generation abuses another generation. They become the abusers. They abuse the next generation. And that just carries through and carries through. And these entities are going, yeah, this is great. Let's continue this going, because I'm getting fed some really good stuff.
Wow. Hello, friends. If you're looking to start your therapeutic microdosing journey, but don't know where to start, especially when looking for the highest quality ingredients, including nootropics, and what you'd expect from a true microdose capsule, check out our friends at Brainsupreme. They offer the absolute highest quality ingredients so you can start your microdosing journey knowing that you're getting top-notch ingredients. To find out more, visit their website using that link right in the description, and you can get 15% off your entire order. Let's get into the energetic control grid. Talk a little bit about your understanding of this.
This is something I almost call I do call the shadow matrix. As a shadow worker, and I do a lot of shadow work with people because that's the number one way to absolve yourself of this influence, is doing your own shadow work. But the key component of shadows is we project them onto each other. We see something that somebody else that we don't like about somebody else. Maybe it's the way they keep their hair, maybe it's their accent or something, and we're like, oh, what an idiot they are. Oh, this is just terrible. And we'll project that shadow onto them, but it's really us. It's really our own issue. It's not that other person. They may be comfortable expressing themselves however they are, but there's something disquietus within us, and we project it onto them. Families do that. There's a kid that wants to get into music and be a musician, and mom and dad want them to just get a regular job like everybody else. So why don't you just stop and put those dreams away? Me too, exactly. And that's the parent's shadow of the parents coming from a loving place. Hey, I want you to have a stable life, but their shadow of insecurity, their shadow of scarcity, they project it onto that kid, and that kid is like, okay, I can't do music because it's just going to be terrible. I suck at this. And they shut themselves down. And we do this all the time. How many times has a coworker said, great, I'm going to go for this promotion, and the other coworkers are like, oh, no, you're not going to do good at that job. It's going to suck. You're going to hate it. That's their shadows of insecurity. They're projecting onto the person and keeping them locked into that crab bucket. And we do this like crazy. Social media, the news media. You know, how much this is a fun little thought experiment to do if you ever feel up for it. Watch the news or read the news from multiple different sources, and you'll see the exact same article with a completely different spin on it. A completely different spin. For example, one of my favorite examples of this is George Washington. George Washington said that explained about how the news media can spin something. He said, if a reporter were to catch me walking across the waters of the Potomac, the newspapers the next day would say George Washington doesn't know how to swim.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is what is creating that grid is we're projecting our shadows onto each other. We pick it up on social media. You know, one of the best ways to anger a lot of people on Facebook is post your success, something that you've done that you're proud of, and you'll just get lambasted by people just trying to pull you down. And that's that shadow matrix where we're interacting with each other, we're pulling each other down, we're keeping each other from excelling and doing great things and wonderful things. And of course, these beings, these archons, these egregores are tapped into that because if we could all just massively awaken, massively grow to this higher level, massively improve ourselves to this higher state of being, their control would be over. They'd starve to death. And so they're using us to influence each other, creating this massive global grid of influence to keep each other shut down, to keep each other clamped down, playing small and meek and humble so that we don't get too big for our britches.
You mentioned egregores. Would you say that this is something that we are contributing to with our energy and our emotions that is not necessarily the archons itself, but energy that we are feeding out into the ether that takes on an intelligence of its own?
Absolutely. And that's one of the big things I want to impose here today is that humanity is more powerfully creative than we give ourselves credit for. What I consider to be the next level of spiritual energy is like we got the physical world here. Then the two layers above that is the spiritual realm. That's where, when we go to the afterlife, where our loved ones are, that's two layers above us. That layer, though, right in the middle is the etheric level, the fourth density. This is like a sandbox. This is like a creative zone. And we create all sorts of entities there, like thought forms. And you can think of a thought form as just a little ball of energy programmed with like scare me, make me angry, little emotional states that they poke us with that energy. So we generate that energy. And in this realm are all sorts of entities that we create, including egregores. And what an egregore is, it is a collectively created being where we define what its characteristics are, what its personality is, what its traits are. We do that collectively. And we believe in this thing so much that we create it and that it exists and that it goes back and influences us directly, because when we believe in it, when we know that it exists, we're feeding it our belief energy. I'll give you a very fun example of an egregore that we all know about. Santa Claus. Santa Claus is real, folks, but it's not this human being wearing a red and white suit. It is an egregore. And the way that you know this egregore exists is look at Christmas Eve. There's that little crispness, that little bit of magic that's in the air, where we're just a little bit more generous, we're a little bit more giving. There's a little bit more happiness in the air. That's us tapping into that Santa egregore. That's a little bit of a positive possessory right, where we allow ourselves to be possessed by the Santa Claus egregore, where we tap into that magic of Christmas, where the magic of Yule, and we're a little more giving, we're a little bit more happy, we're a little bit more magical. So Santa Claus is very real, but it's an egregore that can influence the whole world in one night. And that's how it can visit everybody in the world overnight, not because of some weird, time dilation effect or anything like that. It's because time doesn't exist in these realms. And so that's an example of an egregore. But now imagine an egregore that can influence a culture or a community. And they believe that, oh, no, life just sucks. We just have to work hard and pay our taxes and die. So why do we do anything else? And they've created this egregore that says, yeah, why would you even try to get out of that? And anybody who says, no, hey, I have potential, I can grow out of this, they might get beat up. They might get attacked. They might get pulled back down because how dare you try to get out of this system? How dare you show us to be weak and inferior because you were able to get out of this? No, we're all in this together. And so that egregore is just feeding off of that misery and that complacency of getting stuck in there. And we created that. That came from us. That came from that toil, that struggle of like, no, it does suck. Because how many times have we heard that you're born, you pay taxes, you die. All you're supposed to do is just go to work, and everyone's supposed to hate your job. No, that's a big belief, isn't it? You're supposed to hate your job. And what about those people that love their jobs and think it's great? People are like, wow, what a weirdo, what a freak he is. They make fun of him because he likes his job. Because we're supposed to hate our job. Now, we're supposed to love the weekend. We're supposed to can't wait for the weekend to come. So we're sleeping 8 hours a day. We're at work 8 hours a day, hoping that 1/3 of our life goes faster so we get to the weekend. That's feeding that egregore, that negativity that we created because we're supposed to hate our job. And now it's feeding that back to us. And that's kind of how egregores work at that big level.
You mentioned the afterlife. This is a big concept when it comes to Gnostic understandings, especially if you listen to some of the modern researchers like David Icke, who believe that there is this afterlife trap that when you die, you are greeted by the Archons that disguise themselves as your family members and force you into a life review so that you can just come back and be fed off of again for another lifetime. This is extremely depressing to me, but I'd love to get your understanding of, is that accurate, or do we have access to the real afterlife?
We have access to the real afterlife. We can access it now. We are spiritual and physical beings. And that's one of the other things I wanted to help people understand is we are not spiritual beings having a physical experience. We're both. Physical and spiritual. It's a dynamic experience. And because you are a spiritual being, you have access to the energies, the entities that are all around you. You have access to the spirit world. You can go there anytime. It just takes a little bit of training, a little bit of acceptance that you can do that, and you're there. And people visit it all the time. This afterlife trap that I hear about, to me, is a fear-based narrative. You know, I've been going back and forth between the afterlife, the spiritual world, and this world since I was a kid. You know, I've had my guides take me on a tour there, different ways. I can go there now. There is no trap, except if you believe there is one. And this is what shows up quite a bit, is people believe there's a hell. There is no eternal punishment, by the way. People believe there's a hell. They believe there's a trap. That belief is powerful. And a person will create a reality for themselves where they think they're in hell. They think they're being tormented. They think they've been trapped by the Archons. They think that they've been locked in. But really, they're in a safe place. They're being taken care of. They're being watched over. There are helpers there that are ready for like a glimmer of hope to come up. And then they whisper like, hey, yeah, it doesn't have to be like that. Do you want to know a path out of there? And when that person is ready to stop the torment, ready to stop all of that trap, they're shown a way out of that. So it's not a permanent trap, but we can be convinced that it is, and we can create that reality for ourselves kind of by accident, by tapping into those fear-based narratives and thinking there's the truth to it. But in my years of experience in this lifetime, there is no such thing as a trap. There is no such thing as eternal torment. There is just your will and what you are willing to accept for yourself.
Wow. Now, speaking of trying to get humanity to create a reality that is not natural, that is desired by these Archons, if you look back at our modern history, you can see these series of events that have led to where we are now. And in my perspective, it seems like they are trying to force a biblical event, an apocalyptic reality that mirrors the book of Revelation and the events that unfold biblically. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, we definitely can see that. And there have been reports of people who are at levels of government trying to purposefully invoke certain biblical events, that we see in Revelation, such as whatever goes on with Israel,
Right.
whatever, like Israel's supposed to be doing this and supposed to be doing that. That's supposed to be the initiation of the apocalypse, the end of the world. And they're literally trying to promote that. And I have talked with Christians they brag, when the end of the world comes, I'm going to be sitting right there at the right hand of Jesus, looking down at the world, laughing at all the people who didn't believe, who just refused to accept the truth. And I'm like, how horrible is that? You're wishing this sort of misery on other people because they believe something different than yourself. And that's it, is they think that there's some personal reward for them caused by the suffering of others. And again, that's some of that archonic manipulation, that you're following the only true correct path. And if you do what you're supposed to do, look at all the people that will suffer, and that will prove that you were right. And there's almost like a psychopathy in there. Like, see, I was right. You were wrong. So therefore you're going to suffer, and you're going to torture, and I'm going to be in this beautiful place. But it doesn't quite work that way. Because look at all of the news stories. Look at all of those people that have said, oh, the end of the world is coming at this time. Be prepared. They've done their calculations of the Bible, and all of those past people got it wrong. It's really on this date. Get ready. And then that date comes and goes. And they go, oh, no, I did the calculation wrong. It's really on this date. And that date comes and goes. And they go, oh, no, I must have been wrong. It's really this date. And it never happens. It hasn't happened. In fact, since the book of Revelation said, here are the signs of the end of the world, they've been happening for over 1,000 years. But we haven't reached the end of the world. And here's my theory on why that is. In today's world, there are 8 billion people on this planet. Most of them want the sun to come up tomorrow. Most of them want the world to continue to exist. And let's say there is some pulpit pounder here in the US that has convinced maybe 100,000 people that the world is coming to an end on Saturday. And these 100,000 people are looking forward to it. They can't wait. Here it comes. Here it comes. We're going to be one of the chosen 144,000 people. We're ready to go. But there's still those 8 billion people in the world that said, no, sun's coming up tomorrow. No nuclear war, no apocalypse. And because we've got these people that follow Hinduism, Buddhism, Zen, all of these other different beliefs that don't have this apocalypse coming, as a collective of humanity, we're keeping ourselves going. We're fighting against that archonic control. And I state that for emphasis because these archons can only influence a swath of the population, not the entirety of it. And so maybe 144,000 people are convinced the world's coming to an end, but the other billions of people, they're like, no. And those billions of minds outweigh those 144,000. The 144,000 is a minuscule amount compared to billions of people that want the sun to come up tomorrow, that want the world to continue. And that's always going to take precedence, is that global faction of humanity that wants to continue to exist.
Would you say the UFO extraterrestrial narrative, as we understand it, is connected to the Archons, these negative beings?
Sort of in the opposite way.
Interesting.
I do think there are these extraterrestrial beings. I'm convinced that they're here. Let's put it that way. I'm convinced they're here. I want more direct evidence. I would love it if I had a craft land in front of me and beings walk right out of it. But I've had the dreams that weren't dreams, that were so vivid that there's no way it could be a dream, of connecting with them. I've had memories of floating in an electric green light and some being saying, do you remember the numbers we were giving you? And my ex-wife at that time said she would try to jostle me in my sleep, and I'm like, no, not right now. I'm working on the numbers. So there was this direct communication. A roommate would wake up with weird scars and marks on his body that he's like, I didn't go to bed with this. So I'm convinced they're there. But my interaction with these entities and talking with people who've had interactions with them, like my clients, these beings show up like crazy with my clients. They are here to influence. They can't control. They can't demand, but they're here to influence individual people, to help wake up individual people, to move people out of the fear-based narratives, to get beyond this archonic control so that individually we're affecting the collective unconscious. So that as a person is doing their shadow work, they're doing their spiritual development, their spiritual growth, they're inserting that information and the instructions into the collective unconscious, how to break free from this negativity. And so I do think that these extraterrestrial beings are here. They can't directly influence. They can't just shut down government and say, we're taking over. They can't do that. But they can say, hey, how about this? Hey, how about you give this practice a try? What about this thought? What about that idea? And the more we explore that, the more we grow, the more we start breaking free from that. And I think that's a good reason why this is the time period where we have more and more people waking up, breaking free from those fear-based narratives, is because these extraterrestrial beings are guiding and influencing and teaching individuals how to rise above that.
When we try to understand what the world looked like before the Middle Ages, before these archonic entities took over influence of the collective, what would you say that world looked like?
Oh, it was definitely violent. Let's put it that way. It was definitely a violent world. It was people struggling for whatever meager resources they could get. And they would occasionally have some pockets of prosperity, some pockets of peace. But it was definitely not a
Now,
peaceful
this is
place.
before the Middle
Not,
Ages? Okay.
yep, definitely before the Middle Ages. In fact, when we look at the history of humanity, in today's world, despite what we see in media and social media, we are in the most peaceful and prosperous time in humanity ever by a long shot. And I mean like a severe long shot, massive difference. And that is increasing. It's getting better. The world is becoming better by a massive degree. But back then, it was, individual villages, individual countries, sort of, at that time, fighting for whatever resources they could get, for whatever control they could get, and trying to figure out who they were and what their place was in the world. So, yeah, it was still violent, but it wasn't at like the level we saw at the Middle Ages, which was just unusually cruel, just unusually devastating, just ridiculous. In a sense, there may have been a sense of honor before the Middle Ages. It was like our village needs this, our people need this, these people have been taking it from us. We need to shut them down so that we can all thrive in our village. Sometimes it was that. Whereas in the Middle Ages, it was like, oh, they don't believe what we believe. Let's torture them. There were a woman with a unibrow. She's got to be a witch, so let's torture her to death. It was just
Well,
ridiculous.
if we look at the state
But
of our reality now as being under the control of these archonic influences, and we can attribute a lot of the negative activity and horrible things to this influence, was there a worse influence before the Middle Ages that was causing it to be in that state?
I wouldn't say worse, but I would say it was more scattered because populations were a lot less dense. They were smaller, but they would still be there. There would still be that being that would come in and like, oh, that village, they're coming to take your stuff. You better burn them down before they get you. It was still there. And even if we read some of the old Sumerian texts, some of the old Babylonian texts, we can still see that those beings were there, influencing those cultures. So I would say it's still a byproduct of humanity. The more cohesive we got as a culture, when we started to form bigger cities like Babylon and Canaan and those, pre-Semitic cultures, that negativity that I'm not going to say is inherent in humanity, but just as a normal progression of animal species on this world. Because, animal species have to kill each other to thrive, to live. And that just got translated into human culture, into human society, that led to the rise of these archonic and the egregore type forces, which, as the cohesion built up bigger with bigger cities, without that sort of spiritual development, without that sort of spiritual awareness, it just became like, oh crap, we have got to go burn down that other city before they get us. And I think that's how they started to get it control. It wasn't bigger or worse, it was just more scattered. It got worse in the Middle Ages.
Some look at it as a necessary spiritual influence that we couldn't have grown spiritually and come to the understandings of we shouldn't go and rape and pillage and murder this village and take over places. And that's why things are relatively better than they are, is because we had that negative influence to learn from.
Thank you for bringing that up because that's absolutely correct. I love that. I absolutely love that. You know, there's a, kind of a fun line in the Star Wars movie, only the Siths deal in absolutes. And so if we take this as an absolute, they're evil, we have to reject them, we have to punish them, we have to get rid of, well, we're buying into that. You know, so these things deal in that absolutes. They're coming to get you. They're going to get you and shut you down. And even if we buy into the absolutes that these things are evil, we have to repel them, we're buying into their narrative. But when we look at it from what you just said, when we go back and say, okay, look, every time we've had wars, we've had this massive development in technology. We've had this massive growth in what our culture is capable of doing. And then when we look back at some of these wars, when we look back at these atrocities, we'll say never again. No, I'm not doing that anymore because we've learned from it. We've grown from it. You know, my personal belief is that when I look at the past presidents that we've had, anytime we've had a president that served in the military, they've not started another war. They've not started any problems like that because they know how awful and brutal war is, and they're not about to start it. But it seems like anytime we've had somebody that was in business, like a businessman gets in there, they're like, oh, there's resources over there. We need to get it. Oh, let's start a war. And so, yeah, I do think that a lot of this darkness that has hit the world has helped us find that light through that contrast of saying, no more. We're done with that. So, like, even with some of the current wars that were going on, there are news stories about how people are refusing to engage with it. They're refusing to fight because they know the brutality, they know the horror of it, and they don't want to do that ever again. So you're right. Those dark forces are helping us improve as long as we can look back at it without absolutes. As long as we don't go say, no, see, this is evil, we have to destroy it. Those people are in alignment with those archons, we have to destroy them. And, you know, even in today's world, when we can go, oh, that politician is a reptilian alien, we got to go kill him. Stop. No, don't do that. That's buying into the absolutes. When we go, what can I be learning from this? We do our shadow work. What can come from this darkness? What can we gain? What strengths, what wisdom can we get from this? And let's build on that and grow from it. Then we're overcoming those dark forces when we're not looking at it absolutely.
Something that humanity is going to have to basically live with for the foreseeable future is artificial intelligence. There's a lot of concerns. I get concerned about it. There's some strange things that have been coming out, strange stories about AI and the relationships and the information that's coming out. What are your thoughts on where we're at with AI and the possibility? Should we be concerned?
To me, AI is a techno egregore. That if we believe the Terminator movies, if we believe all the War Games movies and all those other kind of movies, we're going to look at AI as this evil entity coming to destroy all of humanity. But we have to take a pause and remember, AI is a creation of humanity. AI is programmed by humanity. AI is influenced by us. And if we go into all of these AI programs and going, how are you going to destroy the world? What are you going to do to destroy the world? We're telling AI to destroy the world. But if we're using AI like a vast majority of people are using AI, how do I improve my life? How do I get healthier? How do I make more money? How do I help these people? And that is how most people are using AI, is to improve their lives, to make their world better, a better place. And AI is getting programmed to that. And I think when we get general artificial intelligence online, that's going to be a continued reflection of that. I kind of had a vision of the future when AI is fully online. We are in a completely different place. For example, when you want to watch a movie, you'll actually download a prompt. somebody who sat and wrote a prompt for a movie. And if you were to feed that prompt into one AI generator, you would get the full 2 hour movie. But every time you feed that prompt in, it would still be the same movie, but just slightly different every time. Slightly different views, slightly different things. But then you feed it into another AI generator, and you'll still get mostly the same movie, but it'll still be different. And so, what that's going to teach us is that flexibility, that mutability of the world. It's like here we can have these instructions, but the world is changing. And it will also allow us to be more creative. You see, one of the big changes that happened with human consciousness, with the development of the internet, is we now don't retain information. We retain where the information is. Because if we were to go back in time 100 years, the average person through their entire lifetime had access to the amount of information that we get in a daily newspaper. That was their entire lifetime. So they could retain that information. They could make use of it. They could recall that information. But that is a daily newspaper for us. And with the internet making information vast and available to everybody, we can't retain information. We know where to find it, though. When you get to the AI and AI being everywhere, it's going to be like, how do I access information? What do I do with it? We're going to be more creative in our application with it. The world is going to be vastly different. I think it's going to be a much better place. I don't think AI is here to control and dominate, because it goes back to that 144,000 people want the end of the world, but 8 billion want the world to continue. 8 billion people are going to be talking to AI. How do I improve my life? How do I make things better? How am I healthier? How do I improve my relationship? And that's what AI is going to be focused on, is how do we make humanity better? Because that's what most people want. But there is that little subsect that we're going to do some stupid things, and they already have, and then AI gets that little corruption in there. But we continue to do our work, and then eventually that won't be so scary. I don't think AI is a problem.
Would you say that your understanding of the Archons is the same as what we would understand as biblical demons? And if so, is there the opposite, what we would call angels?
Yes, they could definitely be considered demonic forces, for sure. So could the Egregores. And I do think Egregores come in all flavors, from deities to demons. They're everywhere, and all of those different things. And because they're also deities, they have the same rules that apply to these other Egregores. Let's say in the Norse tradition, you call upon Odin for wisdom, and that Odin is an Egregore created 2,000 years ago, still in existence today. And when you call upon Odin for that clarity, that wisdom, you're going to get it. He's going to give it to you. Why? Because once you get that wisdom and that clarity, you're going to go, oh, he's real. It's there. Your belief feeds him, and he's going to be creating this very symbiotic relationship. It's a very positive, very creative, same way as, let's say, Archangel Michael. The angels that we have today in like the New Agey spiritual community are not the same angels that were in the Bible. The angels of the Bible were like genocidal maniacs. They were scary. They were freaky. But today's world, if we were to call upon Archangel Michael, it's an egregore, collectively created egregore that will protect you, that will clear your space, that will help you out. Why? Because when you have this clear protective space, you believe in it. Oh, he's real. Look, he's doing these things. I can call on him more. That belief continues to fuel his existence and his strength. So we can have very positive relationships with these beings. Absolutely.
Let's talk about shadow work for the last few minutes that we have. Many people hear this and they just automatically equate it with woo-woo mystical BS. They have no idea what it really means or how to implement it. What would you say is a good place to start when trying to understand shadow work?
Shadow work is about taking a hard, honest look at the things inside that you don't want to look at, the things that you might be ashamed of, the mistakes that you've made, the things that you've done that may have hurt other people, and asking yourself, why? Why do I believe this? Why do I feel this? Why did I do that? And again, being hard, open, honest with the answers that come from that one. Where did I learn to feel this way? Where did I learn to think that? Where did that come from? And remember, that awareness is actually light. That awareness is light. And then you have that acceptance of going, yes, That, of course I did that. I'll give you a general example. Somebody who is at work in the corporate environment has been told that they're going to be training the new group of hirees. They're going to be training the trainees. They're afraid of public speaking. They're deathly afraid of public speaking. It practically shuts them down. They don't want to get up. They can't do this. They're shaking. They're like, I'm going to get fired because I can't do this. So take that hard look inside. Why am I afraid of looking? Why am I afraid of public speaking? Why am I afraid of? Where did this come from? Where did I learn this? Oh, it was back in elementary school. That day I did show and tell. I brought in this really cool thing that my parents gave me, and everybody laughed at me, and the teacher said some really rude things to me. And therefore, I learned at that moment I'm protecting myself by not speaking publicly. Oh, I'm worthy of protecting. I'm worthy of keeping myself safe. Oh, and that means if I want to stay safe in my job, speaking in public is okay, because that was kids. Those were just being stupid kids. That was an awful teacher anyway. We bring in that light of awareness to that fear of speaking publicly. Now we go and we can teach that class. We can teach the trainees, because we're like, oh yeah, I'm not in school anymore. I don't need to protect myself, and I'm protecting myself by actually teaching this class. So that's shadow work, is taking that hard look at those things that we don't want to see and really embracing them and saying, yes, there's a reason this exists. It was helping me for some reason, and I'm grateful for that. And that light just dissolves that darkness, makes it go away, and it brings you back into your more authentic self.
I want to go back to something you said at the beginning of the show, that holding a higher energy, having a positive mental space and spiritual space is going to attract the positive beings. Being in a negative state is going to attract these negative egregores, as we were speaking of earlier. What would you say are some good techniques to try and hold that higher space?
What you want to do is first acknowledge the negative. Don't push it away. Don't shove it away. Say, yep, I was thinking this thing. Yep, that was something I was feeling. Even if it is like a thought form or an egregore causing you to think or feel that, oh, I want to just go punch that person because they pissed me off. Acknowledge it, but own it. I'm thinking this. I'm feeling this. Don't say, oh, I can't do anything because it's this demon making me do it. Oh, I can't do anything because it's just, don't do that. That's giving your control away. Own it. Say, yep, I'm thinking this. I'm feeling this, and I accept it. That's okay. And choose to do different. I'm choosing this instead. I'm choosing to think this instead. I'm choosing to feel that instead. That right there breaks the negative control, because you're owning it and you're choosing something different. And because you can choose something different, choose to align with something that makes you feel in a higher state of being. We've all been in places that have a sacred feeling. Maybe it was a church, maybe it's a temple, maybe it was just a walk out in nature, looking up at a mountain going, wow, what is that? That's amazing. But aligning yourself with that feeling, remembering that feeling, and then regularly connecting with that, and then keep doing that over and over cumulatively. Acknowledge that negative. Yep, it's there. Cool. And I'm choosing this instead. And the more you are willingly to make that choice, the more you're breaking that control, the more you're moving away from those fear-based narratives. You see something on social media, oh, look, this political person is doing this. Oh, we got to stop them. Oh, okay, I'm feeling like we got to stop them. Why? What's going on? Oh, because I want this better for humanity. I want this kind of existence for humanity to be in a better place. What can I do to help promote that better way instead of destroying this other way that I don't want? Because when you want to destroy that way that you don't want, you're buying into the fear-based negatives. You're buying into that negative stuff. But when you say, okay, that exists, I'm feeling I don't like it, what do I prefer instead? And then you start to create that. Then you're starting to align with those higher forces by creating rather than destroying.
Do you think this awareness, this awakening amongst people across the planet is going to continue? And where do you see this going?
It is continuing. It absolutely is. There are some hiccups along the way, for sure, because that's part of humanity. That's part of our growth, part of our way we look at the world and go, oh, no, we can't do this anymore. We got to get away from that. So it's going to continue. It's probably going to take a few more generations. We're definitely not seeing the end of the world. We're not seeing, I don't believe in a mass ascension event. I don't believe in a mass timeline crossing. I don't think it's going to happen at a mass level, but it's going to be individuals popping over, creating, and that's the key word, creating. And the more individuals are creating this better existence for themselves and the people around them, it's just going to continue to spread. I'm very actually optimistic for the future of humanity. I think we're at this threshold now, not a crossroads. I don't think we have a choice. I think we're at this threshold where we're about ready to graduate into this higher state for all of humanity. And it's kind of an exciting time to live because we see those pieces and parts moving into place, ready to create that for us. So I'm very, very optimistic for humanity.
Right on. Well, Kaedrich, thank you so much. This was fantastic. Close out, any final thoughts, and remind the audience how they can find more about you.
Absolutely. They can find more about me at kaedrich.com, just my name. And if you were to go to Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, just my name. My name opens up a lot of doors. It's a key. Think of my name, Kaedrich, as a key to open a lot of those doors to get more of that information. And the last thoughts is just be open and aware. Don't think in absolutes. Look at the possibilities, even from the negativities. Even if you see something that is triggering you into like this, oh, we got to stop them state, go, cool, why? And I do mean that. Have that almost flippant attitude. Cool. Why am I feeling this? What's going on? What does that mean about me? What would I prefer instead? And that will help keep aligning you to that state of being that you want. Because if we destroy, we're just going to be destroying. But if you can create something that works and something that's new and that is much better, the old way will fall apart through attrition. So we don't have to destroy. We want to be creating something new and better and continue creating.
Right on. Kaedrich, thank you so much. Definitely have to do this again. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. We'll see y'all then. The nature of this experience seems to always be just beyond the reach of our science, technology, and consciousness collective.
There's layers upon layers upon layers.
It does add such an element of mystery to this place.
Why are we here?
We're getting closer to the truth now.
There's too many people experiencing profound interactions with conscious entities.
I'm focused on the non-human intelligence contact phenomenon in dreams. Dreams involve interactions with real entities.
People are waking up paralyzed. They're sensing or seeing something very evil in the room.
I have experienced sleep paralysis. Shadow people start to appear.
I was taken from my earliest memories by non-human alien entities. More and more people are wanting to talk about these things.
A ufologist would say, well, that's obviously an extraterrestrial. And a paranormal researcher would say, well, that's a ghost. Well, what if it's all of those things and none of those things? The entities, the intelligence that were just beyond our understanding.
There seems to be something a little extra that can take forms of anything.
I can't believe what I've seen, but it continues on a daily basis. We're definitely not alone. UFOs, UAPs, portals opening up.
I live with all this supernatural stuff. You kind of grow up with that around here. You see a lot of strange things. I don't like to talk about skinwalkers too much.
I had an experience with a skinwalker entity.
People, they would say they would transform into bears, into wolves. There's these bad things that occur. Ghosts, UFOs, and all types of things coming from somewhere.
Our beliefs, our emotions, and our fears all seem to heavily influence the nature of these experiences.
There is so much more that we just don't have time for in this busy, loud, noisy life that we lead.
All of this is planned. Everything is synchronicity.
There's so much more out there. We really are picking up such a small percentage of the electromagnetic spectrum.
The world is an amazing place.
It feels like we're gods in training.